and welcome back to AR77. Two lovely pistols on the table here for us today. We've got the P226 here by Sig Sauer and the SP2022, which is a replica of a Sig Sauer, but is actually made by KWC in this case. A number of you have asked about rattles or shakes on your pistols, and I thought I'd just do a bit of a video just to talk about that subject matter. And as I tend to do in these videos, I'll probably bring out a couple of more pistols as we go through. Now, the first thing to point out is, obviously, when you buy what I would call a real steel firearm, you're going to get slightly better tolerances, I would assume. I don't own one, so I can't, I'm only basing this on what I've seen and heard and read. You're going to get a closer fit, a better fit, because ultimately they are designed for a purpose which makes them necessarily more durable, and therefore you can expect probably a higher level of craftsmanship, I would assume. You're paying hundreds and hundreds of pounds for these firearms, whereas these, although some of them can be quite expensive, they are usually sort of topping off at the highest level of quality around about, for the most part, the £200 mark, sometimes just over. That makes it quite exciting when we as replica air pistol collectors get hold of or get our hands on one that, even for that sort of budget, that sort of sub £200 in the UK mark, if we get something that feels actually like it's well built and very similar in the build quality to the actual real steel, that gets us excited, and rightly so, because you go, actually, this is like ownership of something which would cost me the earth, but actually I get to shoot this thing, I get to field strip it, I get to use it and practice aiming and this, that and the other, at a fraction of the price. So let's look at what you perhaps can expect from an air pistol then. Let's start off with, I guess, the biggest contributor to this sort of aspect of rattly pistols, and that is that word that I love to use, functionality. With the Sig SP2022 here, there is very little functionality. The slide, while metal, doesn't function, doesn't blow back or anything like that. You can't rack the slide. It does have a dropout magazine, and the trigger obviously works. The hammer works, but it doesn't do anything as a hammer. It only works from a kind of cosmetic point of view. The Sig P226, has a bit more functionality. I've got the magazine out of there just so that you can see, and there's no CO2 in the back there, so we can't do any damage with this pistol as it stands. This is a pellet shooter, .177, and it does have a bit more functionality. You can rack the slide like that. You can see that sends the hammer back. When you pull the trigger, the hammer will engage. It does a little bit more. You've also got, when that is in that sort of that cocked position, you can decock it there with the safety selector. So there's a bit more going on with this pistol than with the SP2022, and because of that, as an owner, you get, I would say, a little bit more pleasure sometimes when you pull the trigger. The slide is going to blow back like that and cock you ready for the next time. I say cock you, it's kind of single and double action. I won't go into all of that today, but yeah, for the most part, when you've got a pistol that blows back, it cocks the pistol ready for the next shot to go off. And because of that movement, and because you've got a slide which is a separate piece, and a piece which needs to move, essentially, you're going to get a bit of this. There you go. A little bit of rattle. Some pistols will have a bit more of that than others, and I would say that amount, for me, is acceptable. Some of these pistols rattle more than others, depending on the one you buy. Even if you buy another Sig Sauer P226, you might get one that rattles more than that, or less. These slides aren't made out of the best quality metal. The pistols aren't made out of the highest grade metal you can buy, but that cost saving is transferred to you as a consumer. So you kind of go, well, where am I prepared to make that compromise. What will I put up with and what won't I? For me, this P226 is a really nice looking replica, other than the lack of the cutout ejection port there. This is a really nice replica. Pellet shooting. You've got 16 rounds in the magazine. For me, that's a compromise I'm willing to make. There are other pistols though. Let's just take that out of the way. Like the 4.5mm shooting BB version of the M&P here. This is the M&P 9. Now this is again a lovely pistol, metal slide, polymer sort of frame. You've got the dropout magazine, so there's going to be a little bit of movement because you've got a magazine and a pistol. Once again, this isn't loaded and there's no CO2 in the pistol, as you can see. But already, as I put that magazine back in, you can hear this kind of almost tinny quality to it. Let me just do the rattle test for you. Now that's quite off-putting for a lot of people. For me, I really love the way that this pistol looks. Specifically, I bought this because I love the way that the M&P looks. I love all the sort of different kind of aesthetic aspects to this pistol. It's a really nice looking kind of Smith & Wesson's attempt at a striker fire pistol. You know, that was what these are all about, really, to compete with the Glock, if we're honest, I would say. The slide will move. It's going to look back after your last shot. You are going to get that blowback action. So I really like that. And I have no choice, really. If I want a blowback version of this pistol, I have no option other than to go for this. I could go for the non-blowback version. I could go for the pellet version, which is slightly different. I think it's the M&P 45. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there's no blowback there, and I can't rack the slide like I can there. So it's not, in terms of shooting the pistol, it's perhaps not going to be as pleasurable for me as it is shooting this. So I kind of put up with that. But there, you know, there's a different level, isn't there, on the scale there. You rattle that and you get that sort of tinny sound. That just sounds a little bit more solid on the P226. So again, there's a difference there. Having said that, there's not a great difference in price between this and this. I think these retail at around about the same price. So it's, again, it's you pay your money, you take your choice. Do you want a pellet pistol? Do you want a BB pistol? Do you want something that sounds like it's made a little bit chunkier, a bit solid? In which case you go with the SIG. Do you particularly like the M&P? At which point there's no comparison. You're going to have to go for that if you want that blowback function. So again, it's really down to your personal preference. Again, if you're getting a pellet pistol, it's better if you want to avoid ricochets and things like that. BB pistol, I don't know, perhaps cheaper ammo, you could argue. Both CO2, so there's nothing really there. Kickback, that's a nice snappy one. That feels a little bit more, well, I was going to say sluggish, but it's not actually on the 226. It's a pretty good blowback there, even though it's arguably a heavier slide. Again, so the choice is down to you. Sometimes a pistol comes along that particularly kind of stands out. For me, one of those pistols is the Glock 17. This is the Gen 4 Glock 17, imminently being, I guess, usurped or replaced by the Gen 5 as Umrex bring that out and release it more widely. This is a full-size dropout metal magazine. It does carry CO2 in the magazine there. Once again, you got that blowback function, and the slide will kind of look back after your last shot. But when it's back, you hear that rattle. That rattle is really just the floating barrel. That's something that people worry about. That floating, I can't do that for too long. It looks inappropriate. But that floating barrel there is a part and parcel of this type of pistol. So that's a rattle that you would expect to hear on this. I think somebody, forgive me, I can't remember who it was, but somebody was asking me about the, it was the Baba Yaga, I think, the Combat Master Terran Tactical replica, And that again uses this kind of floating barrel mechanism, which has been kind of synonymous with a number of pistols since, I think, John Browning's original design for the 1911. So that's an expected rattle, and you can forgive that because that's accurate to the real steel, I would imagine. When the slide is forward though, and the magazine is in, a little bit of knocking there, but nothing sounds loose, nothing sounds like it shouldn't be moving, and it is. So that's what you kind of look for in a higher quality air pistol, I would say. Something that does everything that you want it to do, but also feels solid in the hand, good weight to it, the appropriate sort of materials have been used, and very little weight. Wherever it's not made of one single piece of metal, and taking into consideration all the moving parts on the internals of this, I think that's pretty good. Big difference between that and that. Of course, there are other alternatives, aren't there? You can go for something like this, the SP 2022. You're not going to get that blowback, but you are going to get a fully functioning and quite lovely looking air pistol. It does what it needs to do. It accepts ammunition, it accepts CO2, and when you pull the trigger, something comes out of the end and you can shoot at targets all day long. If you want a little bit more realism, you might want to go for the pellet version there of the P226. That does have your blowback, like I said at the start, but it's more costly. That's going to cost you more than the SP 2022. This you could probably get for around 60 quid, I would say, maybe even less. That is going to cost you closer to perhaps just over 100 quid. Again, the choice is entirely up to you, but you're not going to get that rattle, but you're also not going to get the same level of realism. Other significant mentions that I would add, if you want a really good quality pistol and you're not bothered about blowback, and you want it to feel like something that doesn't shake, rattle and roll as the title suggests, you can't go far wrong with something like that beauty. The 92FS Beretta by Umarex. Beautiful looking air pistol, as I'm sure you can agree. You can get these in this kind of the satin finish with the silver here, the nickel finish they might call it. They do the chrome version, they do a black one, they do a horrific gold one, but this ain't going anywhere. That's a solid hunker chunker gun, and you get many hours of pleasure shooting that. You don't get the blowback, but you really feel like you've got a big mamma jamma in your hand. So there you go, shake, rattle and roll. A few different options as always. Buyer beware, the choice is yours. But don't be overly concerned if there's a bit of rattle to the pistol. It might just be that that's the way the pistol was made. If you get a pistol and it sounds like something's rattling around inside and it's loose, do be careful and make sure you haven't just got a bit of ammunition stuck in there. Make sure you haven't got a BB that's found its way around the internals of the pistol. And always be safe when if you're taking pistols apart or having a look or field stripping to check for things like that. Please do be careful. I would personally go for the blowback. If you can get a plasticky version of this type of pistol, you can get a plastic M&P, similar actually in quality to the SP22, that has a full plastic pistol, but it's a metal slide, but the slide doesn't move. You can get that for around about 50-60 quid in the UK. But personally, I prefer that realism of being able to wrap that slide, pull that trigger, and when you pull that trigger, your slide goes back and you're ready for your next shot. That's just my personal opinion. I'll leave you to your own and respect them as I should. Thank you once again for your time. All the best. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.